before you do that, I want to read you guys something, and I want to get your reaction. So have you guys heard of this lady, Tiara Mack? Have you heard of her?
No.
I don't think
Okay,
so.
well, she's Rhode Island. She's running for senator for Rhode Island. Listen to what she tweeted yesterday. Really excited for the House sex ed bill hearing later today, teaching comprehensive, queer inclusive, pleasure-based sex ed was a highlight of my time teaching. This is what parents are mad about. This kind of stuff. Like, what do you guys have to say about that? Like, she's explicit. Now, this is Rhode Island, it's not Florida. But again, to me, this should be illegal. She should not. How are you able to teach pleasure-based sex ed?
Well, that's really concerning because it goes back to what you talked about with the kindergartner. How is this appropriate to teach this? This to me, this is a fundamental sexualization of our children.
Yeah.
And that is extremely concerning on multiple levels because you're opening the door. If you're having these types of conversations before a child is even developmentally ready to have these conversations, that is harmful.
Yeah. But I think it's the thing that allows
the question
situations like January's.
It begs the question, whose pleasure?
Ooh.
Whose pleasure? 5-year-olds, even 10-year-olds, 12, they haven't had a kiss. They're not sexually awake. Normally, in a healthy environment, if they're sexually awake, it's typically because of some sort of violation.
That's
so whose pleasure are we talking about?
That is such a good question. Thank you. That is so good. Whose pleasure? Because kids are not. Oh, but here's another thing that I've been reading in their papers. So these crazy people, and they want to like position, they have these PhDs and they want to like puff themselves up, but they're crazy. They are absolutely insane. They say that children are not naturally innocent and that the boundary between adults and child, we should remove those because children aren't naturally innocent. They don't naturally have an aversion to, sex, and they if you present it to them, they're open to it. But this is these types of people who are teaching our children, this is what they believe. They're grooming. That is pedophilia.
Well, that's part of the queer theory, and that should be concerning to all parents.
Yeah. But I think it's the way that when you have these teachers who believe this stuff, it is the way that it comes into the schools and how children like your daughter they get introduced into these mindsets. They get introduced to this new language. They get introduced to all of these types of things where it becomes normal. It's like, oh, well, that's just how it is. That's what everybody's doing.
Well, right. And
it's not
normalized, Quisha. The schools are going much further than that. They are.
Don't tell me that.
Well, it's true. And parents need to hear this. I mean, after my daughter formed this plan and the teachers became aware, because that's what they do. Schools are taught to only affirm.
Right.
Affirm any identity, regardless of circumstances. So regardless if this child has mental health issues, a history of trauma, it's affirm, affirm, affirm.
Yep, you're right.
And my daughter was told by a teacher that she was brave. She wasn't encouraged until she was brave 2 weeks prior when she was a girl, identifying as a girl.
Right.
And so it's incredibly encouraging. And the attention from their friend group, from these role models in the form of teachers that they get, it is intoxicating. How does a child then go back from that?
Right.
How do they save face? Because even WPATH, the World Professional, Standards of Transgender Healthcare, even they concede for children and adolescents, you have to give them an out because they know how malleable these children are. They know that children can change course after their brains start to develop. I mean, children's brains are very underdeveloped until age 25.
Right.
And with ADHD, it's typically 27, 28. And so when you think about the maturity level, and then you're allowing these children to make this choice for themselves without parental input or authority, it's unconscionable. I still have a hard time believing that this is what is happening, which is why I've been speaking up, because what the school did, it was not a benign intervention. And they will have you believe we're just doing what we were taught. We're just doing what the law tells us to do. That is nonsense. There is no law that gives privacy to a minor from their parents. Period. And Bernadette can certainly speak, but that
not without the parents' consent. Not without the parents' consent.
Told to me time and again. We have, and even now, now, the lawsuit filed, I am still hearing from Leon County school boards, we have to protect the privacy of their children, and they mean from their parents.
Wow.
This is a huge wedge between our daughter and my husband and myself. Yeah. Huge wedge, because what it did, and if I could just read you one of the portions from the guide. Now they have
sure.
But let me just tell you how nefarious this is, because they are painting all parents as enemies and as dangerous to their children. What a dangerous narrative that they are putting out young children. So this is under a question and answer from the Leon County Schools transgender, non-conforming, lesbian, gay, bisexual guide. Question. A student has exhibited behavior in school leading administrators or teachers to believe that the student is LGBTQ+. Should the parents or legal guardians be notified? Answer. No. Outing a student, especially to parents, can be very dangerous to the student's health and well-being. As many as 40% of homeless youth are LGBTQ+, many of whom have been rejected by their families for being LGBTQ+. Outing students to their parents can literally make them homeless. So let that sink in. This is how teachers are being trained to believe that it's actually dangerous and harmful to out children to their parents. And I want to be careful because, sexual orientation and gender identity is often conflated, and they're two very separate things. But when you're grouping all the letters together, oftentimes people don't understand, and the consequences are very different. So when we're talking about transgenderism and we're talking about the schools socially transitioning a child, we're talking about a complex mental health issue. Right. That the schools are grossly unqualified to be taking these steps without parent input. These need to be monitored by a mental health professional, because social transition oftentimes leads to medical transition.
I was just going to say that it's, not only are they leaving the parents out, but they're not having like a licensed professional who is specialized in this area to deal with this either. And for a long time, what's that?
Even if they had the most expert person at the school, and in truth, frankly, there are a lot of issues with some of the mental health professionals that are endorsing this discordance. But even if they did have someone there that, a PhD, that PhD has no right to enter into a patient professional contract relationship, because children don't have contracting rights.
Right.
Okay. Right. There has to be consent of a legal authority to speak for them. Why? Why has the law developed in this way over the course of hundreds and hundreds of years? Because we have recognized over history that children are vulnerable. They're vulnerable because of by virtue of their immaturity. They're in the process of developing. They are vulnerable to being manipulated. They're suggestionable.
Yeah.
Vulnerable in a whole variety of ways, and so they do not appreciate long-term consequences. They don't even understand.
Right. They don't even understand.
The idea of socially transitioning, followed then by quote unquote medically transitioning, which is a euphemism because indeed a female can never become a male. That's a biological impossibility.
Right.
But however you want to term it. And then most often that leads to sterilization of a child. So how can children who have no concept, they themselves are children, they've never been a parent,
right?
Contemplated, they've not. So how can they even appropriately weigh the consequences of that? They can't. That is why the Supreme Court put it in the hands of a parent to be able to weigh the consequences and to be able to give consent on behalf of children.
Yeah. I mean, it makes complete and total sense.